from you. It's been a good chunk of time hearing about your projects and efforts. Hopefully we can learn about those and then think about or provide feedback in a live session, and then also help us kind of think about whether these, if you have projects or programs that you're considering for submitting for federal funding, whether FEMA or HUD, we can kind of help you think about whether they might be a good fit. And then of course we'll talk about next steps and how we might work together, or whether it would make sense to provide ongoing support, technical support. So we wanted to do around the room, or I guess around the Zoom today, and we want to hear from you just briefly your community, organization, and your role, if applicable, and just one goal you have for the workshop. And then, like I said, later on we'll hear more about what you your specific projects and efforts that you're doing in your community. So not sure the best way to manage this here, Harriet. Do you have a preferred approach, or should I just pick names as they come up on my screen? Okay. Actually, I'm not sure how to get the full gallery view back. There we go. Okay, so I'm just going to pick the names as they show up in order on my screen. So we've got Ashley first.
Hi, I am a planning and extension specialist with Texas Sea Grant, located in Corpus Christi, but there's 3 of us in Texas, 1 in Harris County and 1 in the Rio Grande Valley. My background's in urban planning, and we try and help communities with planning aspects. We've helped communities to update comprehensive plans or create floodplain management plans. We try to find funding to help support that work at this time. And I'm really hoping to learn more about this BRIC funding, because I get a lot of questions about it and I'm still kind of confused as to how to help people capture this funding and what they can do with it. So I appreciate you guys inviting me to this webinar. Thanks.
Thanks. Next we have Susan Lilly.
Susan Wiley from DeSoto, Missouri. I'm with Citizens Committee for Flood Relief in DeSoto, and I don't flood, but we have had major flash flooding throughout 2003. We had a young father wash through a drainage tube right in the middle of DeSoto, and we also have 5 flood neighborhoods. We're working hard to fix that. We've had lots going on, and I will tell you all about it later. And my background is just being an old grandma, and I don't flood. I just hurt for the people that do. So.
Thanks, Susan. Sorry for the mispronunciation. And Michelle Smith.
Yes, hi, my name is Michelle Smith. I'm the marketing director for the Community Empower and Development Association, and we're located in Port Arthur, Texas. We experienced devastating flooding during Harvey, and we found that some communities received some funding to get some mitigation work done, but we're still struggling to get other communities funded and to get some solutions for them, because we also experienced a lot of hurricanes and recently even a winter storm in the coastal community that I live in. So we're working on a lot of things to try to get some minority communities some help that they deserve.
Thanks. And I guess folks know Alexis, Harriet, or would like to do an introduction?
Yeah, I mean, I'm Alexis. I'm the program manager at Anthropocene Alliance. I think I know most of you on this call, but I'm looking forward to learning more about FEMA BRIC, because I don't know anything, and just ways that we can help in this process.
Thanks. Thanks. And Rebecca Jim.
Yes, I'm Rebecca Jim from LEAD Agency, which is Local Environmental Action Demanded, working in Oklahoma at really in Miami, Oklahoma, on the downstream effects of one of the largest lead and zinc Superfund sites. So when we flood, it's heavy metals that can impact our community. So I'm very interested. My goal is really to learn as much as I can. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thanks. And Kelly Main.
Hi, everyone. I am Kelly Leilani Main. I'm the Executive Director of Buy-In Community Planning. And we've had the privilege of working with a couple higher ground communities, including Susan and DeSoto, to start strategizing around how to secure funding for voluntary property acquisitions or buyouts. So I'm very interested in this workshop to learn specifically about buyouts, but also how communities can leverage green infrastructure benefits for their buyout applications to make them more competitive, and also any advice that Earth Economics has on helping communities get matching funding for the FEMA requirements. Thank you.
Thank you. And Gordon Jackson.
Hope everybody's doing okay. This is Gordon Jackson. I am chair of the Environmental Climate Justice Committee for the Biloxi, Mississippi branch. I'm also ECJ chair for the state NAACP state conference. And I'm also on the board of STEPS Coalition, which is a South Mississippi based organization that has an environmental pillar. So a lot of moving parts. And what we're doing, most of my work right now is focused toward the East Biloxi community, our people of color community, and we'll look at it everything from flood issues, addressing our flood issues, addressing our housing issues, to renovating the community through developing a civil rights corridor. Also, we've had some groups break off, and we have a food co-op right now in its early stages of attempting to establish a full-scale grocery store in the area, which is a food desert. Then also with STEPS, we're kind of partnering with them on other issues like an individual solar program, but also a community solar program. And so with STEPS, we are working not only within the Biloxi, Mississippi area, but also Gulfport, the Moss Point, and the entire South Mississippi region and things. And so we're looking for a comprehensive plan where hopefully in some way, if possible, we can incorporate all of these efforts possibly together under kind of like one umbrella, and be able to, so these entities be able to support each other. I have a goal of establishing the eco district in East Biloxi. Hope that's also included and things of that nature. So a lot of these moving parts, and we're hoping we could bring it all into one umbrella here in South Mississippi.
Thank you, Gordon. And next on Zoom is Kristen Marcel.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm the director of the Climigration Network. We've been working with Harriet's network and some other community-based networks. We've been working very closely with Buy-In and some of the leaders on this call to understand how we can create a more supportive process for communities that are trying to make the tough decision to relocate.
Thank you. And we have Jessica Granis.
Hi all, thanks for including me in this call. I had the pleasure of talking with you a couple weeks ago about some of my work on community land trusts, but I, in my day job, work with the National Audubon Society, where I lead our coastal resilience and work to advance nature-based solutions. And we are hosting a similar training with Earth Economics focused on the Mississippi River Delta region, and working with some community-based partners there to build up our expertise on the FEMA BRIC program and how to drive resources to underserved communities and to nature-based projects. So really excited to be part of this conversation. I also do a lot of work on federal policy, so engage on Capitol Hill and with the agencies on reforms that could be made to these programs. including permanent authorization of the Community Development Block Grant Disaster Recovery Program. So it's great to be aligned with this network and to hear some of your thoughts on how we could improve these programs to drive more resources to places in need. So thanks so much.
Thank you. And next we have Loretta Slater. If that's, not sure if my pronunciation was right. Not sure if maybe, did Loretta just join? There are a couple of things just switched around for me, so it's confusing. But I think I'll move on. If Loretta, if you're able to unmute, just let us know soon. We'll just move on, and we're doing introductions here.
Did you ask Alitra?
Oh, I said, oh no, sorry, Loretta was up on my screen here.
And Jonathan Green?
Yeah, and Jonathan. So Jonathan. So we'll move on to Jonathan.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jonathan Green. I'm the Executive Director of STEPS Coalition. Won't take a lot of time because Gordon did a pretty comprehensive overview of what the work we're doing. But we're partnered with the Biloxi NAACP and the East Biloxi Community Collaborative to help redevelop East Biloxi, which is a historically African-American community that has been devastated by several natural events over the last 15 years, including Hurricane Katrina and I guess the man-made disaster BP oil spill. So right now we're working to redevelop mixed income housing, institutionalize or revitalize the small business community that existed there before those disasters. And under Gordon's leadership, really try to turn the region or the area, the neighborhood into an eco district, as well as a historic civil rights corridor. So our interest in this is just really seeing if there's a fit in terms of the funding that we try to bring to fore to get those things accomplished.
Thank you. And yes, Alitra is the last name I have here on Zoom, aside from Loretta.
Good afternoon. My name is Alitra Perryman. I am the Program Director for the East Biloxi Collaborative. The collab.
I seem to have lost you, Alitra.
Oh, she's gone mute again.
Yes.
Alitra, are you able to unmute? Ah, there we are. Alitra, are you there? And Loretta, are you able to speak? Let's go ahead.
Okay, yeah, and we can finish off the introductions later if you like, if you're having trouble here with the connection. Okay, so I'll just go ahead and let us know in the chat, or Alitra and Loretta in the chat, if you'd like to do an introduction. Now? Oh, yeah, yes.
Okay, I'm sorry, I'm taking the Zoom from the car and someone called. Did you hear anything?
No, but start from the top if you can. Okay. Thanks.
So, good afternoon. My name is Alitra Perryman. I am the Program Director for the East Biloxi Community Collaborative. The collaborative is a group of community-based organizations and community members that work to improve education, health, and economic security in East Biloxi. Our partners include the Biloxi NAACP and STEPS Coalition. So everything that Jonathan and Gordon mentioned are the items that we're working on in collaboration with other organizations. So we're glad to be on the workshop. So thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you, everybody. And yeah, we're looking forward to hearing more about your efforts here in the later sections of today's workshop or training. So I'll just move on here to the next slide, just to do a quick introduction to Earth Economics and where we're coming from. So we're a nonprofit organization based in Tacoma, Washington State. And I'd just like to acknowledge that, first of all, that we are operating on the lands of the Coastal Salish peoples, which is the ancestral homelands of the Puyallup tribe of Indians in the 1854 Medicine Creek Treaty. So the core of our work is taking nature into account. So that means quantifying, valuing the benefits, the resilience, social, environmental benefits that natural infrastructure, green infrastructure provides, and nature-based solutions. And we kind of work in do that in a variety of ways, and working with whether it's federal, state, local government agency partners, NGO partners, including Audubon, Jessica, and then some of our projects are foundation funded, which allows us to do kind of more cutting edge policy, experimental valuation work, as well as providing some, one of the programs that we're most proud of is this work that this partnership with the Kresge Foundation that we've had the last few years, whereby the Kresge Foundation funding allows us to engage with community-based organization partners like Anthropocene Alliance and a number of others, Kresge grantees around the country, to provide technical assistance such as economic analysis, equity analysis of the costs of displacement, support for funding, pursuing funding mechanisms that we're familiar with, like this FEMA one here. So I'll just move on. And just a bit about our approach, because it's kind of reflected in the way we approach the FEMA work, is that we kind of think of our work in terms of three pillars. We have the awareness building, which is educating public and, of course, policymakers around the value of nature and nature-based solutions. There's place-based analysis, which is conducting economic analysis like valuation, benefit cost analysis for specific projects to support partners or clients. And then there's policy and finance. So that means looking at how can we scale up investment in nature-based solutions and holistic community solutions, which typically do include some sort of nature-based element in policy, and by developing or pushing through newish funding mechanism, funding and finance, or doing a better job of using existing funding mechanisms like FEMA. And so just to give, I guess, a sense of how we do these pieces. So we've worked with FEMA a bit on their policy several years ago to help them incorporate environmental benefits, values for environmental benefits into their benefit cost analysis tool. Since then, we've been working to, as Johnny will kind of talk about, we've been working to conduct place-based analysis, so benefit cost analysis for a number of partners and around the country for FEMA applications. And then there's sort of the general awareness building, whether it's like this, trying to build capacity for local partners to go ahead and pursue funding mechanisms like this, or providing kind of awareness building at the federal levels or FEMA regional level to say, here's what we're seeing, here are the barriers, here are some opportunities to further improve policy for your hazard mitigation programs. And so, when we think about economics, Earth economics, that is, we often think, first of all, if we look at the economy, the economy and our communities, we think about what are the assets that have value. So these are some big questions that we often ponder. And for those assets that we know provide value, how do we measure them? Are there ways to measure them that can help quantify the value where it hasn't been there before, or has been given a default value of 0? And for those assets that provide value and that we can measure, or even if we can't measure, how do we promote scaling up investment in those assets? And so if we think about sort of economics and all the institutions that we have, whether financial, federal, so forth, even cities, municipalities, in the past, we've really thought about sort of nature as an accessory, something that's nice to have and something that you might sprinkle on top once you're done with your important centralized infrastructure, like your wastewater treatment plants and your roads and your levees and things like that. And that's really been driven by the economics. But you know, the way the economics is really beginning to just take a new view and flip that view around. And economics is really beginning to realize today that really nature is the big thing and the economy is housed within it. And so that's, as if you look at a satellite map, you can see that pretty clearly here. This is Little Rock, Arkansas. We did a workshop a couple of years ago. And this kind of has some implications, of course, with how we manage our economies and investments for climate resilience. And there's this landscape scale natural infrastructure, and there's also kind of urban scale natural infrastructure, which is also incredibly important. And so if we think about the economy, we tend to think about the economy, different capitals that make up the economy. And you know, traditionally economics has really measured built capital very well. So that's your bridges and your cars and your computers, your desks that you're sitting at. And we do a really good job of measuring that in the GDP, for example, as well as in benefit cost analysis. We can look at avoided damages to built capital. We also have human capital in the economy. So that's knowledge, skills, experience that you all bring to your communities. We have social capitals, that's your trusts, networks, institutions. That's incredibly important and difficult to sort of measure or put a value on, but we know it's incredibly important to the economy. And in fact, the society would probably break down if we didn't have social capital. So that's just a photo. This is just a photo I found from the cruise convening, which is a cohort of partners that the Kresge Foundation brings together once in a while. We have then, of course, natural capital or natural infrastructure, which broadly speaking includes sort of our ecosystems and air, water, soil, biodiversity, all of these things, which provide the foundation for really any economy, whether that's providing stable climate or natural resources for extraction. So this is, you can't really have an economy without your natural capital. And well, for better or for worse, we have financial capital, which is perhaps not as tangible, but it really allocates resources between those capitals. And so if we, just to give a quick couple of definitions here so that we're all on the same page. The definition we're using for nature-based solutions throughout this presentation is those solutions that incorporate the natural environment, that mimic or work in concert with natural processes to provide clean water, clean air, flood, fire, and drought risk reduction, and other benefits. So nature-based solutions do things that that our agencies need done, like water management. So that's flood or stormwater management, water quality. But they also do things that they provide these co-benefits that are on top, additional. And like I said, you can kind of, this is kind of a made up distinction, but you can kind of think of nature-based solutions in terms of two scales. So you have your site scale, which is often urban level green infrastructure, which includes permeable pavement, green roofs, bioretention, urban trees. And then you can think about sort of landscape scale natural infrastructure, which are your coastal wetlands, watersheds, aquifers, your floodplains, which provide floodwater storage that may be reducing flood risk to your communities downstream. And then another definition another definition is ecosystem services. So these are, as defined by FEMA, these are direct or indirect contributions that ecosystems make to the environment and populations. And as we'll see, FEMA does provide some pre-calculated values that allow you to put a value on these ecosystem services for a hazard mitigation project. And so these are examples of ecosystem services that are provided by nature-based solutions, whether at the landscape scale or urban site scale. And won't read through the list, but you can see really important services, including water supply quality, carbon sequestration, air quality. And one I haven't mentioned here, but that is incredibly important, is of course hazard risk reduction. So whether that's flood risk reduction, drought, heat, heat island reduction, storm buffering. This is a benefit that we can quantify now for FEMA, quantify in our FEMA applications for projects that incorporate some sort of nature-based element. And so this is how an example of what this now sort of the implications for a benefit cost analysis framework. So with our sort of conventional benefit cost analysis, if you're a stormwater agency, for example, you might be just looking at really a couple of economic measures and one environmental measure, perhaps, of stormwater captured. But if we want to take a more holistic view of using benefit cost analysis, we can now quantify and even value many of these broader environmental and social benefits. And so the implications here are that we can start thinking about, for example, flood protection in a new way. So this is one example of a flood protection project, and it does one thing very well. It moves water off the landscape in Los Angeles and pushes it out into the ocean. It doesn't do other things very well. So in fact, it even has negative impacts in other areas. So for example, it has zero habitat value. It exacerbates heat island impacts for communities. It cuts communities off from one another. And so it's not very good at anything else. And so if we can sort of think about and quantify flood protection in a new way, then maybe we can also help agencies look at flood protection in a new way. And this is certainly happening at the local level and FEMA, so at the federal level as well, as we'll see with FEMA's policies. So they're really recognizing that nature-based solutions can provide these core services like flood protection or stormwater management, but also a range of co-benefits. So this is a flood protection project, a flood risk reduction project in North Seattle, where, nearby where I used to live. And it's on Thornton Creek. And what they were deciding between was building a big culvert to reduce backup flooding, or building a slightly smaller culvert, actually a smaller culvert, and then expanding the floodplain and restoring that floodplain to provide the additional floodwater storage. And so it wasn't just a pure green infrastructure solution, but the green infrastructure, the sort of hybrid solution, green and gray, helped to make it a cost-effective approach. And we were able to provide some sort of a white paper that helped supplement the City of Seattle's benefit cost analysis for this project, and show how if you can quantify the environmental and social benefits, the project really becomes cost effective. And so that's kind of demonstrates here. Also, when we think about infrastructure, we'll talk a lot about nature-based solutions here today, but we're not all hazard mitigation, not all worthwhile hazard mitigation projects need to be just pure nature-based solutions. Infrastructure is really a continuum, and you might have, on the very end, natural infrastructure and wilderness and things that are have less human input and management. And then as you move along, you kind of have green infrastructure where there's more more human input, but you have things like permeable pavement, which still mimic the processes of nature and to some extent. And then finally, of course, you have at the other end of the spectrum, you have gray infrastructure, which tend to be centralized infrastructure, which are very, of course, concrete heavy, and like things like your treatment plants and levees and so forth. And of course, they're important. We need these things to some extent. I think what we need to recognize is we need a rebalancing of these things. And right now, with the economics and investment mechanisms are heavily skewed towards gray centralized infrastructure, and we could probably get. We know we can get more cost-effective outcomes and maximize our return for society if we sort of rebalance these investments. And this is sort of a general slide, again, not FEMA specific, but if we think about, these are some of the considerations we might want to think about as we're trying to get to scale, investing in climate adaptation, climate resilience in our communities. And so things that you might want to do, and maybe some things you've already done, include taking inventory of your assets. So what are all the natural, man-made, human, social capital assets that are currently providing value in your community? And so that sometimes that is done in the context of hazard mitigation, that sometimes is done in a local hazard mitigation plan. Then we have next we have making the case. So another thing you might want to think about is making the case, and that includes looking at understanding the performance of different assets, green and gray infrastructure assets, as well as the cost efficiency, so which can deliver the same outcomes for the least cost. And then benefit cost analysis, which is kind of the broader view. What are the comparative benefits and costs of these different solutions or different scenarios? And then based on that, you might want to establish a vision and targets. And I'm sure many of you have been working on this within your communities or have done this. So having a vision for how you, what a resilient community looks like, what a prosperous community looks like. And then there are various things at the local level and funding and financing and stakeholder support efforts that you might want to undertake. So these are some general steps that kind of line up with things that also support FEMA applications and FEMA project definition. So I'll just do a quick introduction, a high-level introduction to FEMA and their kind of new perspective. And then Johnny's going to do a deep dive into FEMA's programs specifically. And so I'll also stop quickly for a Q&A after my presentation here. So a bit more about FEMA here. First, I'll just introduce some definitions so we're all on the same page. You may be aware of this general definition of resilience, which is the capacity of individuals, communities, institutions, businesses, so forth to survive, adapt, and grow no matter what kinds of stresses and shocks they experience. And so I guess one important concept here is stresses and shocks. And I'm sure you're all aware of or experiencing these stresses and shocks. So stresses are things that are ongoing, chronic, things like drought and economic long-term unemployment, and of course shocks are things that make the news more often, things like hurricanes and floods. And so of course both are important to think about in the context of resilience. And then so if you think of resilience as the big umbrella term, hazard mitigation is kind of a specific subcomponent of resilience. So hazard mitigation is any sustained action taken to reduce or eliminate the long-term risk to life and property from hazards. So sort of if we think about emphasis here, any is important because FEMA is fairly agnostic when they talk about hazard mitigation. They recognize that there are a range of solutions for reducing risk, and they're certainly promoting nature-based solutions as one of those. But then there are other things like social capital, so social institutions, social capital that can also support resilience. Then there's the long-term, the other kind of key concept here is life and property. So if you can quantify and show how a project is reducing risk to life and property, then in many ways it's already eligible for FEMA funding, aside from all the other eligibility factors that we'll go into. But it's possibly, it might be a good fit for FEMA funding. So these are some of the hazard types that I'm sure you're all aware of. These are hazard types that are very common, that FEMA is quite comfortable with, and they're comfortable with funding solutions for these. Flood, hurricane, wildfire in the West, mostly earthquakes, landslide, drought, tornadoes, and snowstorms. And I don't have heat here actually, but heat is the biggest killer in the US. And so we've been thinking about we've developed a prototype tool and thinking about ways that we could bring in FEMA funding for example, an urban green infrastructure project that reduces heat island. So that includes planting urban trees and increasing green space within a community. And that we think there's a lot of potential there, given the high mortality and risk associated with heat, which is growing. And so just from FEMA's perspective, and this is a Tetra Tech slide, but from FEMA's perspective, this is how hazard mitigation fits into the overall kind of their overall framework. So there are 5 phases of emergency management. You have mitigation, which are those things that you are doing to, like we said, reduce risk to life and property in the future. You want to do prevention and protection, which are things like levees and flood walls, which are directly protecting communities. And then, of course, when you have a disaster, you want to respond as quickly as possible. So that's something that FEMA does, is probably often best known for, because they come in after a disaster, help with emergency response. And then there's the recovery, of course, which is incredibly important. And you want to ensure that you can recover at least to where you were, or if not, improve the situation, which is, of course, a really big issue right now, because in especially relation to equity, a lot of communities, that underserved communities tend to come out worse off after disasters, whereas wealthy communities come out the same or better after disasters. And that's partly an accessibility issue. So there's some there's accessibility to FEMA funding and support is an issue that is being addressed, or we understand is FEMA is looking at very closely. So as from a sort of a nature-based solutions angle, which is kind of our focus, but you could think about these as supporting holistic solutions in general. FEMA has had a few important policy advances in the last few years. And so in 2013, they developed this environmental benefits policy, which at the time really just applied to flood acquisition. And that environmental benefits, so we helped FEMA through a subcontract develop environmental benefits values that were plugged into their benefit cost analysis tool, which made it easier to show, kind of show a full picture of what's happening with some of these projects. And in this case, it was for buyouts. And with the 2013 policy, so you're able to show not only the flood risk reduction of a buyout, because you're removing, demolishing, or relocating the structure from the floodplain. You're also able to show the environmental benefits of having that healthy, restored floodplain back where the footprint of the structures were. And so that helped to kind of show a full picture and also justify more of those projects. And then in 2016, FEMA expanded that policy to take kind of a fuller view of nature-based solutions and green infrastructure. And so they introduced some new eligible project types. like post-wildfire mitigation. So that's like replanting, reforestation, slope stabilization right after a fire, aquifer storage and recovery to support drought mitigation, and this some of these broader categories like floodplain and stream restoration and green infrastructure, which means that it's easier now to, well, it was easier to fund nature-based solutions for hazard risk reduction, as long as you kind of quantify those in the benefit cost, which was, we realized early on was quite a barrier. So we kind of took it upon ourselves to try and go out there and support as many community partners as possible, land trusts, NGOs, in developing kind of innovative nature-based FEMA applications for some of these project types in places like California and Texas and the Carolinas. And then in 2020, this FEMA introduced this new policy, which basically made it easier to use the ecosystem services in benefit cost analysis. And in fact, means that a project like a green infrastructure project or a nature-based project like a floodplain restoration, let's say, you no longer, in theory, you no longer need to even show flood risk reduction to any structures or reduced harm to people. The project could pass on its environmental benefits alone. And in practice, you really do want to have, you do want to try and quantify and show the value of reduced damages to property and people and harm to people. But with this new policy, it really unlocked the use of environmental benefits in FEMA's benefit cost analysis tool. And I should say that, so FEMA's benefit cost is, they use it for all of their hazard mitigation grant funding. So you may know this, but they're required to do benefit costs to show the benefits of projects outweigh their costs for any funding that they allocate. And that is, it's still a barrier, even though it's becoming easier to do, to use the benefit cost tool, and they've made it a lot more streamlined. They say that they want to turn it into the TurboTax of benefit cost analysis. It's still a huge barrier, and even we have experience working on it and working within it. But for communities that are new to this, even small and mid-sized cities who really aren't able to dedicate sufficient staff time, it can be a huge barrier. And so one of we've heard, I don't know what the status of this is, but it's heard some discussion that some folks, I think including some internal folks at FEMA, and maybe Jessica can clarify here, but maybe talking about FEMA developing a programmatic BCA, so that doing a benefit cost analysis for the whole program, or at least certain aspects of the program, so that applicants, especially for applicants in communities like yours, don't need to do a BCA for a project, which would, of course, help reduce barriers hugely. And so this is just the policies these are the policies that were introduced in 2016, 13, and 20. And I'm going to stop here and let Johnny take over. But before I do that, just want to see if anybody has any questions or wants to add anything to that. So yeah, if Johnny's going to do a deeper dive now into some of FEMA's programs and BRIC specifically, and a bit about the benefit cost analysis, and then we'll take a short break after that, and then we'd like to hear about your efforts and see how we can kind of make these things match up potentially.
And Susan
has her hand up.
Oh, sorry.
I think Susan has her hand up apparently.
I just wonder what would cause a city that has flooded 4 times in 3 years not to apply for this stuff. Is it because it's so hard? In my understanding that the city has to apply for it, not individuals. It has to be come through the city. And why on earth would they not apply? I mean, because I'm sitting here shaking my head, no, no, no. And then I remember, oh, our city didn't apply. So.
Yeah, without understanding the full context, I don't want to speak for them necessarily, but it can be a pretty burdensome process. And really what the city should be doing at the very least is documenting really well what the history of damage has been over the course of the last 3 years. And if the city has flooded 3 times and it's impacted people and property, it's not just flooding that's occurring out in the floodplain or in a field somewhere, but it's flooding on houses or posing a threat to people's lives, and they can document that. Then it does become a lot easier to apply for funding. There's opportunities to use pre-calculated values that alleviate some of those processes, and FEMA is working to make that easier, but it still does require capacity to take on these applications.
We had documentation. We lost somebody in 2003, 2016. Actually 3 people. One person was evacuated by boat and had a heart attack and passed. But without somebody smart enough, like the buy-in group Harriet has hooked us up with, we didn't apply until last October. Now we're hopefully waiting for some help. We're waiting to hear, which is supposed to come any day. But I guess it's just hard stuff. And am I wrong in thinking the city is the only one that can apply?
It really depends. It depends who has jurisdiction. So the county could apply, the city could apply, a nonprofit could apply. The state could apply. It depends who has jurisdiction over that area and what's outlined in the local hazard mitigation plan.
A nonprofit can apply.
I'm sorry?
Did you say a nonprofit can apply?
Yeah, for the hazard mitigation grant program, a nonprofit could apply, but not for BRIC.
Oh, interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
We could have been helping you all along, Susan.
Well, certain nonprofits are eligible to apply and other nonprofits are not. So they have to be like a land conservation nonprofit.
Right.
Yeah. So Earth Economics is a nonprofit, but we would not be eligible to hold land and apply for funding. Yeah, and I believe that Rowan is going to step away. He has a childcare obligation. Rowan, are you still there?
Yeah, I'm about to step out. I'll
Okay,
be back in 30
do you mind
minutes.
do you mind handing the screen back over?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, sure. Didn't know I had control. Okay.
Cool, thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, Rowan will be back here shortly, but any other questions or follow up on that? I'll make sure to kind of touch on some of those opportunities in the next section there.
Well, we have a city person here, Daryl. I'm not sure if you're available and able to speak. It would be interesting to hear from your perspective. Have you applied for such funds, and if not, why not?
I'm not in the hazard mitigation side of things, and I haven't really. It'd be some coordination on that front. I don't think any emergency operations folk are on the call, so I'm really more on the basic property management side of things. And I've only been in the office since 2011. Since I've been here, I have not been specifically in contact with emergency operations folk in regarding to serious flooding events where loss of life has occurred. But we'd have to kind of deal with the emergency operations folk to see what hazard mitigation opportunities were or were not pursued. As far as what happened specifically in Pittsburgh.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right. There we go. Okay. I believe you can all see that.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So I'm gonna do a little bit of a deeper dive on the FEMA hazard mitigation assistance programs, and the three ways that they fund hazard mitigation assistance is through the first and probably reason that a lot of us are here today is the BRIC program that we've all been hearing so much about, and that stands for Building Resilient Infrastructure and Communities. And that replaced the previous national competition called the Pre-Disaster Mitigation Assistance Program. And so this last year was the first year that they accepted applications for it. They received nearly 1,000 sub-applications from folks that wanted to implement pre-disaster mitigation. And for this last grant cycle, I believe there was $500 million available for projects, and they received requests for $3.6 billion in projects on the federal share side of things. And that total proposed project cost was about $5.5 billion of mitigation projects that were proposed last year for the BRIC cycle. So it was really competitive last year. We haven't seen what projects are going to be funded and make it all the way through, just because the timeline is so much longer. But FEMA really is thinking big with this, with the BRIC program, and they want to see large projects, and that's what they were pushing out to their through their communication channels, is that they are thinking big with this program. And the BRIC program funding is expected to increase from what we've kind of heard through the grapevine. It's supposed to be set at 6% of the previous year's disaster mitigation dollars that are spent, and so it's a set aside. And the way that the way dollars are being spent by FEMA right now in an upward trend would indicate that that 6% is going to be of a larger and larger share. And so we can see more and more dollars available. Another opportunity is the Flood Mitigation Assistance Program, which is another annual nationally competitive program that allows states, local communities, tribes, and territories to apply for hazard mitigation projects that reduce or eliminate the risk of repetitive flood damage to buildings insured by the National Flood Insurance Program, the NFIP. And so that's really a flood-specific program where FEMA has its roots, and it's how do we get homes and other structures out of the floodplain and eliminate that risk of repetitive damage. And then we have the Hazard Mitigation Grant Program, and that's the one where nonprofits can apply, and other local government agencies, states can apply, tribes can apply, territories can apply. But this funding is available after a presidentially declared disaster. I will say that while the focus of this workshop is on BRIC, a lot of the requirements for applying for funding are consistent across all three programs. So sometimes it may be the case that there's enough grant funding in a state that it doesn't really make sense to go to a nationally competitive grant opportunity when you could just apply and compete with folks in your own state. Which it can be the case in a lot of the Gulf states after hurricanes, A lot of times there's a lot of money that goes into the states that you would have an opportunity to apply for grant funding through the HMGP. And then just really quick, a table of who is eligible to apply for each program. You can see that private nonprofits are eligible to apply only for hazard mitigation grant program funding.
Do they all fund green infrastructure?
What's that?
Do they all fund nature-based solutions?
I believe that the flood mitigation assistance would fund nature-based solutions, but I'm not positive on that one. I'm less familiar with flood mitigation assistance, but BRIC and HMGP certainly would. And then I'm not sure on flood mitigation assistance. So across all three of those programs, here are the commonalities that we see, which is the types of projects that are eligible. You have to have a cost-effective project. So Rowan had mentioned previously that a requirement for funding is that the project is cost-effective. You have to comply with EHP. You have to provide a budget. There has to be some sort of a match. A lot of times it's a 75% federal match and a 25% state or local match. There are some caveats there. Certain communities are eligible for a 90% federal cost share and a 10% local match. And then also in terms of if we wanted to pair or match this local funding with HUD dollars, even though that's a federal source, HUD dollars are the only federal source of funding that can be matched with FEMA federal dollars. All projects have to highlight an alternative project that would alleviate the hazard, and that you have to justify why that alternative was not chosen. And then we also want to incorporate future conditions into the planning. So that could be sea level rise, population growth, changes in the floodplain. How are the conditions for this hazard going to change in the future? And then finally, we really want to make sure that that local hazard mitigation plan is consistent with, or sorry, we want to make sure that the hazard mitigation project is consistent with what's outlined in the local hazard mitigation plan. And so that's why a lot of times the first step to building resilience in a community is engaging with local hazard mitigation planners to then set yourself up so that you can implement projects that that are outlined and meet the criteria set forth in that local hazard mitigation plan. And a little background on how this often works. It's that homeowners, if someone wanted to have their home bought out or somebody wanted their business to be bought out, the structure to be bought out, or maybe it's an elevation, or maybe it's a green infrastructure project, they would then go and engage with one of these sub-applicants. So that could be a state agency, a tribe, a private nonprofit, local government, and so that could be the city proper, but we also have worked with park districts to apply for funding. So a lot of times they are really well set up to manage and steward the land after the acquisition takes place. And so they make really good applicants when we're talking about buyouts and green infrastructure projects. And then those sub-applicants will apply to the state or the territory or the or a federally recognized tribe, and those then the applicants will prioritize and make sure that the sub-applicants have submitted everything that needs to be submitted, and they will prioritize the applications based on what they want FEMA to fund. And applicants will then pass that on to FEMA, and request funding, and that's where it will get graded and determined whether or not they will award funding. And the process is very lengthy. I don't want to scare anyone off, but it can be a really lengthy process to get hazard mitigation projects implemented. So like I said previously, the first thing that we need to do is develop that local hazard mitigation plan. And then once we do that, we start defining projects that fit well within the local hazard mitigation plan. We would wait for either a some sort of funding opportunity, whether that's through BRIC, FMA, or HMGP, and you would submit an NOI, a notice of intent to submit. The applicant or the state or the tribe, the governing body, would then screen that, review it, make sure that it fits within the eligibility criteria, and they would either invite you or reject you to submit an application. Oftentimes that's not a very big hurdle. It's purely just saying, here is the proposed project, here is the hazard that it's mitigating, and we are an eligible entity to apply. So it's a really easy, simple couple questions on what you're proposing to do and how it's going to mitigate the hazard. The real fun comes in on the application, where you have to start developing that detailed scope of work. You have to model how the mitigation project is going to change the risk that is posed by the hazard. You have to conduct a benefit cost analysis, and that has to match with the budget. And then you have to identify project alternatives. Those applications are then submitted to the state. The state reviews them, ranks them, and then will submit that to FEMA. And again, FEMA will then do the same thing essentially that the state did, but kind of comb through it with just make sure that everything is eligible and compatible with the program, and they will either approve or deny funding. This isn't always, oftentimes once the state submits it to FEMA, they really want to get funding on the ground, and they want to provide this funding to the state. So they're not really looking for reasons to deny the project. They're just making sure that it lines up with the letter of the law. And so they will work with the state, and then the state will work with sub-applicants to make sure that their funding goes through. And there's often times request for additional information that occurs where the state is asking, or FEMA wants more information about the project so that they can make a final determination. We've had a lot of projects where it's really just a back and forth conversation between the either FEMA and the state and the sub-applicant. There's this conversation that's going on to make sure that all the boxes are checked. And then once you are approved funding and the project gets underway, you have 36 months to complete that project. So they're really looking for these shovel-ready projects. Once you're at that stage, you need to start being able to implement that project. To harp one more time on the hazard mitigation, local hazard mitigation plan, the idea here.
Can I just interrupt? People have got questions. Should they ask you now or wait until you?
Yeah, yeah, sorry, I can't see the chat. If you wouldn't mind.
Gordon has a question. And I think
okay.
Yeah, I was just asking that in our case here, and eventually work directly with MEMA, the state agency subsidiary of FEMA.
I think I may have missed the question.
I was just asking, can you hear me now?
Yep.
I was just asking that if we went through this process, would we eventually work directly with MEMA, the Mississippi EMA, you know, the state subsidiary? So we will work directly with them.
Yeah, so the way that it works is that you would apply to oftentimes the emergency management department. So whoever's in charge of emergency management at the state level, you work with what's called a state hazard mitigation officer. And they would help you get your project to a stage where it's ready to submit to FEMA. So you never really work directly with FEMA.
Okay, thank you.
And are there other questions?
Susan's got one. You're on
I
mute.
just had a comment. Now I understand why the Heartlands Conservancy has connected with us just in this past week. They are a land-based not-for-profit. So I feel very fortunate. I didn't understand, and thank you for helping me understand that. I'm really excited about it. They went through our bridges and under our bridges and everything else. And they've bought out hundreds of thousands, tens of thousands of acres in Illinois. And now they're moving into Missouri to help us. So thank you for letting me know what really is going on. I didn't understand. Very fortunate.
If I can cut in again, I'm sorry, but Jonathan had to sign off, and he wanted me to ask, because one of the strategies that we're looking at is developing a community land trust. Would a community land trust be considered a qualified nonprofit entity?
Yes. So that's who we have worked. I mean, we've probably worked the most with community land trusts. Okay. As long as they are, I don't know what the right word is, but incorporated as such, they would be eligible.
Thank you.
Great.
I was just going to ask about the local hazard mitigation plan, but it sounds as though you're going to talk about that now, because you said that that's the starting point. So I guess I'd want to know, some people, presumably their communities are already covered by a local hazard mitigation plan, and some aren't. So it'd be good to know how they find out if they are or aren't.
Yeah, I believe that local hazard mitigation plans are fairly comprehensive across the United States and territories, and it's a bit of a hierarchy. So you might have a city hazard mitigation plan for some of the larger cities, and then you might have a county hazard mitigation plan, and you might fit under, or I guess alternatively, you might fit under the state hazard mitigation plan. So there's these different levels of hazard mitigation plans, and you want to find the most granular and site-specific one that you can. Google is the best resource for finding those I've found. They often are on the city or the county page, but a lot of times I just search for the city because it's outlined in that hazard mitigation plan. But yes, the hazard mitigation plan, the idea is to identify the natural disaster risks and vulnerabilities that are common within an area. And then after you identify those risks, you develop long-term strategies for protecting the people and the property from these events occurring. And the mitigation part of this is that it helps break the cycle of disaster damage and reconstruction that we see, and thus saving the community dollars and making it stronger. So I guess the process here is that you begin to assemble a team of experts, and you reach out to technical experts, define the planning area. Are we looking at the city scale, or we're looking at the county, the state, and you invite partners to participate in this process. So it could be individuals, agencies, neighboring jurisdictions and businesses to participate in the identification process. And then you begin to identify and assess the risk. So what are the characteristics and potential consequences of these hazards? This also includes understanding where the hazards may occur and what people, property, or community assets may be in harm's way. Next, you want to develop a mitigation strategy. So what are the priorities and long-term strategies for minimizing the effects of the hazards? And so communities will base that strategy on an assessment of their unique situations that they're in, and then also whether or not they can support or how they might achieve that mitigation. And then you would get that plan approved you would submit that plan to the state, and then they would submit it to FEMA, and you would have an approved local hazard mitigation plan. The key here is that if you can engage in this process, you can start to sway the language that is in the local hazard mitigation plan. So a lot of hazard mitigation plans are starting to recognize the importance of natural infrastructure in their community and in their community's resilience plan, where certain areas previously and historically, I guess, may have said, hey, we've got flood problems, we need to pour more concrete, build bigger levees, push the water out, and not recognizing that floodplains are a critical part of this process. And it just creates a slight hurdle when you're trying to apply for funding to restore the floodplain, because it's not necessarily outlined in the local hazard mitigation plan.
And so, sorry, just so you know, each of the folks on this call are going to be going, so we can't apply if we don't have a state or county hazard mitigation plan. But you're saying that in most cases there's likely to be one. I mean, I just Googled Susan's Jefferson County, and there didn't seem to be a county one from what I could tell, but there did seem to be a state one. So she could apply as long as we looked at it, and there seemed to be some correlation between what they're saying and what they're saying in the plan and what DeSoto wants to do. Correct?
Yes, they should be able to apply. FEMA is going to require a different level of local hazard mitigation plan based on certain criteria. I'm not really sure how they determine that, but there may be an opportunity to apply under the state. I'd want to follow up directly and look into that to see if
right. I see we're getting good info on the chat. Jessica has done a map of where all the plans are, and Kelly says that there is a plan. I just didn't find it in my right. But you're saying we should be trying to implement. How often are they renewed?
I believe it's a 6-year, 5-year. I believe it's 5 or 6 years that the plan is updated. And so it can be a lengthy process of 1 to 2 years beforehand that you can start getting involved.
Good. That would be a good thing for all our members to do, to sort of try and start influencing those plans. Exactly.
Yeah. And I think that this presentation is a little bit more focused on once you have the local hazard mitigation plan in place, what sort of projects are eligible. But that being said, it helps to kind of understand the whole process so that you can start to integrate this sort of stuff into the local hazard mitigation plan when it comes due.
Okay, good.
All right.
Susan's still raising her hand.
Oh, sorry, I can't see the
sorry.
video.
We went through it with our flood study. The Corps of Engineers went through and studied for 18 months, I believe. And their last meeting with us was just that. We had a plan. They gave us a scenario. It's Labor Day weekend, and there's so many people on duty at the fire department. and they marked out which house was most susceptible to flooding, where the biggest loss of life, the times of the days. So we have that. Why couldn't we already use that? Kelly says it is on there. So how do we take that further?
So, sorry, Susan, do you mind if I just answer that question for you?
Okay.
So the hazard mitigation plan that Johnny's talking about is something that's specific to FEMA and is required to be approved by a local jurisdiction. The study that the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers did for DeSoto made recommendations, but it wasn't approved as an official hazard mitigation plan by the city of DeSoto or the county. So what you'll be looking at and what we'll be looking at together if we apply or when we apply for FEMA funds is the East-West Gateway did hazard mitigation plans for a number of counties in the St. Louis area. Jefferson County is included within that, as is the city of DeSoto. So the U.S. Army Corps study is really powerful evidence to make the case for buyouts, but it's not a hazard mitigation plan. It's a flood study, and those are two separate things.
Okay. It just sounded so much alike that, okay. Sorry.
No, don't be sorry. I just wanted to clarify, and I know that for a lot of communities, you'll be seeing more studies and plans, and it can get very complicated, very confusing because things have different timelines and they might have different recommendations. And there's no need to apologize for questions. I just wanted to use DeSoto as an example of where there's a lot of different pieces of information and documents that we have to go through together to make a very strong case. But there are specific requirements for FEMA. So we have to look at the hazard mitigation plan. And then we can use the Army Corps study to support our evidence, right? It's kind of like making a case for it. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it can be, we've identified this as one of the big problems is that there's so many different opportunities for funding that are solving the same issue. And so it can be really burdensome, and there's these different plans going around, and it almost needs to be all kind of brought together in a more efficient way. I just don't think that they figured out how to do that yet.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to say maybe one thing for additional clarification. So one of the reasons one of the ways you can think about the Army Corps study as well, Susan, is that a hazard mitigation plan has to cover all of the hazards. So if you actually look at the East-West Gateway hazard mitigation plan, it includes tornadoes and earthquakes and levee and dam failures. Like, it includes so many different hazards, which are not just specific, for example, to the primary hazard in DeSoto, which is flooding. Right. So that's one of the other things to keep in mind, is that these hazard mitigation plans are comprehensive. So they're a much bigger picture of all of the hazard mitigation or hazard related challenges that a geography might face. Right. So they're not going to be specific to one particular type of hazard.
Thank you.
All right. So now we're going to move into BRIC and talk a little bit about the different funding opportunity, or the different ways that BRIC can support mitigation and resilience in communities. So this last year in 2020, the available pot for funding, there was what's called the state and territory allocation subtotal. And what that does is it allows each state to apply for up to $600,000 in mitigation funding that would support capability and capacity building activities. And what those are is those are activities that that enhance the knowledge and skills and expertise of the current workforce to expand or improve the administration of mitigation assistance. So these are not actual mitigation projects that put shovels on the in the dirt, but rather just I guess planning or pre-mitigation type projects to support the planning activities, which may be a really good opportunity for this group if we don't necessarily have have projects that are ready to submit and have benefit cost analysis done, have all the studies that need to go along with that. This can support a lot of that administrative behind the scenes work that needs to occur before a mitigation project. There was also a tribal set aside, and so that was 300,000, or sorry, the tribal set aside allocated dollars directly for tribes, $20 million in 2020. And then the big pot of money was really the national competition. So this is a nationally competitive application program for mitigation projects. These are projects that are designed to increase resiliency and public safety, decrease injuries and loss of life, and then decrease the risk of damage and destruction to property, critical facilities, buildings, facilities, infrastructure, bridges, roads. And so those are the projects that they were thinking really large scale. They were really open to green infrastructure projects and pushing that. And the cap on that was a $50 million federal cost share with a 25% local match, or a minimum 25% local match, I should say. So these are really large projects that can be submitted, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they have to be small projects. I mean, large projects, you can also submit for smaller projects. That's just a national cap there. And then something to add that I think it's worth adding, that is any funds that are not awarded from the state or territory allocation or the tribal set aside was reallocated to the national competition. And I mentioned that because there were cases where that did occur, where a state didn't apply for any BRIC funding, and so that money then gets pushed into the national competition. And then lastly,
if you apply for one, does it automatically go to the other, or do you have to apply for both the state as well as the national competition?
So with this one, it's actually the state is just for the community and capability and capacity building activities. So those planning activities is falls under the state and territory allocation.
Right.
But all projects, so actual mitigation projects, fall under that national competition.
Right.
Yeah, so you couldn't apply, they would be different project types, so you couldn't apply for one or, I mean, it doesn't go across both categories.
Right, so for the maybe odd exception, Susan might be one example, but otherwise our groups are likely to be going for the state, territory, community planning in order to get their project proposal ready so that they could then go for the national competition.
Exactly. Yeah. And then one other way that BRIC is helping communities apply for this funding is through non-financial direct technical assistance. And that is providing assistance from benefit cost analysis, H&H, hydraulic and hydrologic studies to help develop that application that will then be turned into a mitigation project application. So really making sure that a sub-applicant can submit that high quality application and also work and submit projects that are kind of new and innovative ways to reduce risk from natural hazards. So that isn't under the available funding, but it is non-financial assistance. So they will provide you with assistance. And I was surprised to hear that not a lot of people actually did apply for that funding, but I think it's going to be a huge opportunity in 2021.
But didn't you say that there were only 10 opportunities, which is just a weird thing, I guess.
Yeah, and I don't remember off the top of my head how many people ended up applying for those slots, but it wasn't very many. Or let's see, Jessica. Okay, 12 applications for 10 slots.
And so, can you apply now for that money, for that assistance?
I'm not sure. I think that it was associated with the NOFO, the Notice of Funding Opportunity for the 2020 grant program, and it was due on that. I don't believe so.
Right.
Yeah, it would be associated with that that initial funding.
Okay.
So that will become available again, assuming that they do it again. It'll become available in September of 2021. And Harriet, I'll just ask that you monitor the chat. If I know that there's a lot of I see a lot of orange popping up.
Yeah, I'll monitor the chat.
Okay, thank you. So a little bit more about capability and capacity building. Again, these are activities that enhance the knowledge, skills, expertise of the current workforce so that they can improve the administration of the mitigation assistance. And so projects like how to update building code activities, partnerships, project scoping, mitigation planning, and planning related activities, and really diving deep into the scoping, project scoping. Some of the eligible project scoping activities include scoping and developing hazard mitigation projects, so engineering, design, feasibility. You can conduct meetings, outreach, coordination with sub-applicants. So that could be just community engagement. Doing evaluation of facilities to determine what the appropriate mitigation action even is. So maybe we don't know that yet. We can use FEMA dollars to evaluate facilities to identify the best alternative. Also working to do EHP planning. So the environmental planning and historic preservation considerations, bringing those into your project, collecting data for the benefit cost analysis. A lot of times that can be a really burdensome thing that not a lot of communities are actively doing, which is why I had mentioned that at the very least, if a community has flooded 3 times in the last 3 years, collect the data so that you have it, because it becomes more and more difficult to collect the right data as time goes on. Certain types of H&H studies can be done for if you're doing a flood mitigation project. So looking at how will flooding be altered if this mitigation action is implemented, and what is the current flood risk. And then you can also use this funding to coordinate, scope, and develop the hazard mitigation regional or multi-community hazard mitigation projects. So kind of coordinating those larger scale multi-community hazard mitigation projects that will have an impact on more than just the site. So some examples of natural or nature-based solutions that have been outright outlined by FEMA include floodplain and stream restoration. And so that could be just restoring the natural floodplain so that it functions and holds on to water more. The acquisition and demolition or relocation of structures and restoring that to a naturally functioning floodplain. We've looked at culvert retrofits, aquifer storage and recovery. So if you are in an area that has outlined drought in your all hazards or your local hazard mitigation plan, you can use FEMA dollars to fund aquifer storage and recovery. Various stormwater management projects. Post-wildfire mitigation is a really interesting one where FEMA will pay a set rate per acre, and it's automatically approved. We'll talk a little bit later about pre-calculated benefits, but it's fairly easy to get dollars for post-wildfire restoration. And then you can propose kind of this broad category of nature-based solutions or green infrastructure that FEMA will fund. And the big point is that FEMA is really open to hearing new ideas. And if you can quantify and you can value the benefits that are associated with your mitigation project, it doesn't necessarily have to fit perfectly within this framework here or this list of actions. If you can show that it reduces risk to people and property, FEMA is going to take a really close look at it and be interested in it because they are looking for innovative ways to achieve resilience. The project timeline, this graph, the projects can take a long time, is what I'll just start with. And what this graph is showing is how long it takes for approval of mitigation projects. And so you can see that it's getting a little bit faster, but this is years after approval and or years after the initial disaster declaration. And you can see that the average time to approval is 5.5 years before funding even starts hitting the ground, or rather the average time before funding goes to applicants is 5.5 years. And even if you were the fastest and most important project, that average time to first approval is still 2.3 years following the disaster declaration, which is why you see with projects like, with disasters like Hurricane Harvey and Florence, it takes a long time to get resilience or mitigation dollars on the ground. It's a large pot of funding, but it can take a really long time to get those dollars on the ground. I'm going to pause there and just see if there's any questions in the chat. Or is it just a chat?
No, yes, there's just no questions.
Okay. Just passing notes behind the teacher's back, I guess. Mm-hmm. So the BRIC program, the way that the BRIC program is reviewed is there's both a technical and a qualitative review on these programs. And so we'll pass these slides around after the workshop. I do want to kind of move through these quickly, so I'm not going to go through each category. But one of the things that I did want to point out is mitigating risk to one or more lifelines. So something was really brought up quite a bit in discussions was FEMA's emphasis on lifelines. And those are, a lifeline enables the continuous operation of critical government and business functions, and it's essential to human health and safety or economic security. So those are those fundamental services in the community that kind of stabilize all other aspects of society so that it can function. And so they really want to, if you can tie your project to community lifelines and assets of whether it's services like power or water, and making sure that, or roads, making sure that it eliminates or reduces the risk to those lifelines or the disruption of those lifelines. In terms of qualitative review, this is, I think it's useful to understand what it is that they are looking at in terms of projects. So they're asking, will this project and has the application shown these qualitative attributes here? So in terms of risk reduction, they're asking how will the proposed project reduce risk and at what level will it reduce? So what are the other benefits that the project is going to provide? Does the project consider multiple hazards? We're talking that that communities, although flooding may be the most present hazard that is on people's mind, are there other benefits of this project that reduce risk to other hazards? Also, they want to know, is the project incorporating innovative or new ideas, is the project in a rural community that has seen an increase in development? They're asking, sorry, that came off wrong. They want to see innovative projects that have not necessarily been seen before, because they understand that not all communities are going to fit the blanket definition of what mitigation looks like. And so if it's in a more rural community that isn't necessarily fitting the description of resiliency in an urban area, are they taking approaches that aren't necessarily fitting the same definitions as the urban ones? They also want to, so that's the biggest qualitative review points, is through, does the actual project reduce risk and at what level? They want to see that the project is incorporating future conditions into the mitigation action. So looking at changes in population, demographics, sea level rise, and then also have data sources to back that up.
Is this also relevant to the community planning? Are they going to be, is this the same review process when in fact you might be using the community planning to find out some of those things?
Yeah, that's another good question that I'm not sure if it goes across both both projects and community planning.
Okay.
Yeah, but I can follow up with that. In terms of leveraging partners, they do want to see that you're engaging with multiple people on the ground. So are you working with technical experts? Are you working with nonprofits? Are you working with private organizations, other government entities to kind of get feedback on the project and gain support on that project? In terms of implementation measures, they want to see that the project inspires confidence, that the application inspires confidence that the project will actually be completed and successful as designed. And so they want to make sure that the proposed project costs and schedules are realistic. They want to see, do you have a history or do you have are you able to back up that you will be able to effectively manage this process? This BRIC program is meant to be large scale and fund a lot of, I guess, solutions at scale. And so they really like to see the population that is impacted, kind of the bang for the buck. So if it's if it's a project that costs a lot but benefits a lot of people, they're really into it. If it's a smaller budget and benefits a smaller amount of people, they just want to see that relationship is there. They also want to know, is this benefiting? They want to know who is going to benefit and what is the makeup of those of who's going to benefit. Are the most vulnerable people, members of those communities, going to be benefiting from that project? Is it going to negatively impact vulnerable members of the community? They want answers to all those questions. And then outreach activities, they want to know to what extent the stakeholders or groups contributed to the projects. So kind of going back to the previous slide where the leveraging partners, they also want to know how you engaged with the community to get them involved in the planning and decision-making process. And before I move on to benefit cost analysis, are there questions?
No, I mean, I guess my hope is that you know, we can get in the community planning proposal, the groups could be successful, and then they pay trusted people to write these proposals so that they won't need to be doing all of this stuff themselves.
Yeah, I think it's it is a little bit, I don't want to call all of this stuff too in the weeds. I'll try to kind of fly through the benefit cost analysis, but it's good to understand where these projects need to head and what the kind of criteria they need to fit into, and what some of these processes are, because they are kind of long brewing processes. And I agree that it is worth applying for the CC&B or the technical assistance, because then someone can just do that for them.
Right.
Yeah. So really quickly on the.
Sorry, can I just? So maybe you can just confirm or deny this, Johnny. I just want to reiterate that it's really important that the eligible entity who needs to actually apply for this grant, right? So that could be your city or the county, like they need to be on board also with this process, because they're the ones that have to submit it to the state. So I know, Susan, that it's been very frustrating over the years to work with the city of DeSoto, but we've been very fortunate that the town manager there has been more than willing to accept the help of our team, working hand in hand with Susan and other members of the Citizens Committee to help put together this application that the city then will review and is providing comments on, because they are the ones that have to actually submit this formally as an application. So I just wanted to reiterate that point, that it might be difficult because there are strenuous relationships sometimes with these local governments, but that it's really imperative for getting these federal dollars that you find a champion within your local government that will help you and provide feedback in this process. So if you have any thoughts about how to approach that, Johnny, because I know a lot of places either don't have capacity or there's, strenuous relationships, rightly so, for a lot of different reasons, like how to approach getting them on board.
Yeah, I would say that there's a lot of different, first of all, there's a lot of different agencies within the local government that would be eligible to apply for that funding. And so identifying what one most aligns with with your organization. So that could be the Parks Department. It could be a I guess utility within the city, someone that is going to kind of already be bought into your mission, would be the way to do that, and then work that direction, because they are all eligible to apply. But also political support, if you're able to get some sort of political support, whether that's just through the city council, through state representatives, if you can leverage any sort of those connections, those also will help with the application. And I agree that there are way too many times where you see an application go forward and it didn't have any sort of partner support, and the state will hardly even review the application, even though so much work went into it by the sub-applicant. If it doesn't have that local support from various managing entities in the region, then it's not going to get very far.
And I guess there might be some communities where, and I think Todd might be an example of this in DeSoto, where he's kind of, well, if someone else is going to do the work for me and I get the credit for getting the money in, this sounds like it's attractive to me. Of course, some cities are just, no, I want to flood out this community But I think you're all on this call because you have some kind of relationship, and hopefully, you know, the city managers or whatever city staff will feel that they're getting a credit for working with you and bringing in dollars.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Anything else on that? Okay. I'm gonna kind of fly through this one and maybe skip some of it. But the high level point here with benefit cost analysis is that really FEMA wants to know that the benefits, both present and future, compared to the project costs, are going to be higher than, or the benefits are going to be higher than the costs. And so what you get when you do a benefit cost analysis is a benefit cost ratio. And all FEMA projects, if they're going to be funded, need to get above that, that benefit cost ratio of 1.0, which just means that the benefits outweigh the costs. FEMA really wants your project to be cost effective, and they themselves see it as a hurdle and not something that they're trying to gatekeep with by any means. It's just the way that the federal dollars work. And so it can be important to at least do a preliminary benefit cost analysis in the early stages of the project development process to make sure that you meet cost-effective eligibility requirements, because you don't want to get too far down the road and then realize that the project isn't going to be funded because of the benefit cost analysis. Some of the benefit categories that you can look for would be avoided damages to structures, roads, bridges, also the contents of those structures, other critical services. Loss of function would include something like a road flooding and no longer being able to drive on that road. It would cause detours and backups, and FEMA will allow that as a value that you can include. Emergency response costs. So what does it cost when we have to send crews out to, or even just the community of sandbagging and protecting their assets from floods, evacuation costs, and then also things like firefighting costs if we're talking about wildfire. FEMA is there to protect both property and life. So if you can quantify and value what the avoided injuries and casualties will be through this mitigation action, you can include that. And then also you can include environmental and societal benefits. So what is the habitat value? What is the aesthetic value? What is the water quality value of these new or of the mitigation action? Fortunately, FEMA has done a lot of work to eliminate barriers with the BCA. And so, for instance, they conducted analysis of thousands and thousands of previous benefit cost or previous hazard mitigation projects, specifically acquisitions and elevations. And they estimated that the average benefit derived from acquisition projects was $276,000, and the average benefit derived from elevations was $175,000 per property. And so what that means is if you can acquire a home for under $276,000 and complete that project for under that price, you don't need to run a benefit cost analysis because it's automatically cost effective. Same goes for if you can elevate a property for under $175,000, you don't need to run a benefit cost analysis. And so that can be a really big barrier for communities, and now it's eliminated. And one of the gripes is that FEMA does not allow for the inflation, such as tying that to CPI. And so we're trying to push them on that. So it is set at $276,000, but they do allow for regional adjustments. So if you're living in an area that is more expensive or if your community is in an area that's more expensive than the national average, you can actually inflate that based on that multiplier. There's post-wildfire mitigation to help get grounds on the, our dollars on the ground quickly after a wildfire. Those are things like debris cleanup and reseeding, and replanting to kind of stop the risks that follow, or the risk of additional disasters that follow wildfire, like flood and slide and drought. Also, there's avoided costs of stormwater conveyance and treatment infrastructure. So if you can quantify the benefit in terms of gallons of stormwater that you're avoiding, FEMA has a pre-calculated value of $101 per million gallons. Drought, if we can show that we're recharging an aquifer in a drought-struck area, that has a value of $3,455 per 1 million gallons of water. And that's based on the cost and avoided cost of having to build alternative public drinking water supplies. And then we have environmental benefits, which vary by land cover. So wetlands have fairly high environmental benefits of around 38,000, or I think riparian areas is what it's defined as, but have an environmental benefit of $38,000 per acre per year. And then they also have things like green open space and estuary, wetlands, different areas, forest. And so those all provide a different level of benefit. And so what you could do is you could conduct restoration on a certain area, or you could buy out a home and then add in what the environmental benefits are provided by that natural space once it's returned to kind of the natural land cover. And that can help push the benefit cost analysis or benefit cost ratio over 1. Other areas that we'd like to see kind of expanding is specifically around green infrastructure. Those are typically the hardest things to quantify. So if we can identify areas in which we can put $1 per acre per year, or $1 per acre per $1 per acre foot of storage per year, that would alleviate some of the hurdles there. I'm going to do a quick case study, and then we'll move on to the next section there. So one of the projects that we did in Houston was to look at a project where our project partners proposed acquiring and restoring 47 acres of land upstream of residential areas to reduce the height and velocity of the river downstream during storm events. And so basically what our partners were saying was that forests and prairies and wetlands do a lot better job at storing water than non-permeable surfaces like parking lots and pavement. And so what you're seeing here is the proposed flood storage parcels in green, and then the downstream structures that were damaged during Hurricane Harvey. So the idea is that we can alleviate just a slight amount of flooding on these downstream structures. And even if it's only an inch or two across 100 homes, that has a significant benefit cost ratio. And so we're not necessarily trying to acquire and relocate all of these homes and people that are living in them. We're trying to fix the solution, or fix the problems that are occurring because there's non-permeable pavement and there's no water being stored upstream, so it's just pushing down into the developed areas. And it's a fairly intensive process to do this, because you have to essentially identify what the value of all those downstream structures are, and how damages occur currently on those properties, and then and on those structures, and what will happen if we reduce the flood height by, say, an inch or a half an inch for any given flood event. So it's a fairly intensive process to do, and can be a really large hurdle for communities to model that. And this was done back in 2019. And and this is before the new environmental benefits policy came out that said you can use environmental benefits to justify a project on its own. So if we were to do this project today, in theory, we could look at what is the value of the various land covers that we're seeking to acquire and restore. Those 47 project acres, the various dollars per acre per year over the course of 100 years has $9.5 million in benefits, and the project only costs $3.2 million. So that benefit cost ratio is 3.0. When we look at it using, just going back to that previous slide, when we looked at, oh, I don't have the initial benefit cost ratio on this slide, I apologize, but the project benefits of this that we had modeled based on the reduction in flood height was around 4 million. And so the benefit cost ratio was around a 1.5 or so. And it took a really long time to arrive at that number. But if we were to just use the environmental benefits alone, you actually get $9.5 million in benefit. And so that just kind of goes to say that FEMA has this opportunity to use pre-calculated environmental benefits and emphasize that they are okay to use because they're both cost-effective projects. They were just that was just arrived at in two different ways, and they should both still be funded through that analysis. But one allows the community to do it much more quickly and opens up the door for other communities to apply for this funding and not have to kind of fret about the hurdle of the benefit cost analysis.
Sorry, Johnny, so can you confirm that FEMA will accept BCR based on environmental benefits alone?
The way that the policy is written, so this is a new policy, and only, I guess at this point, 6 months old or so. So it hasn't been fully proved out yet. The policy says that the project can be accepted on environmental benefits alone. That being said, it has yet to be seen whether or not that will happen. We do have a project in California that we'd like to kind of test this out on, where we would like to show the traditional benefits that push it beyond 1.0, but potentially submit it as an environmental benefit project alone that also would push it beyond the 1.0 threshold. And so it's really a big question on whether or not it would pass through. You certainly have to show that the project has benefits to people and property. You have to meet that criteria still, but we'll see if FEMA would push through a project that passed solely on environmental benefits.
But FEMA did when they introduced the policy, one of the case studies they give as an example is they say, here's a floodplain restoration in a rural area that doesn't have many structures nearby that flood, and this project wouldn't have passed, but now it can pass. And so I think FEMA would pass through FEMA, but I think the states, being kind of the gatekeepers, the state hazard mitigation officers, they're the ones that collect and sort and rank all the applications from all the different sub applicants, and their goal is to submit what they see as the strongest applications first as the top ranked projects. So whether that's for BRIC or for post-disaster HMGP. And so so you can do it, but I think it is advisable to, like Johnny said, make sure that you either at least highlight and talk about the hazard mitigation benefits first and foremost, or quantify them to the extent possible. And then the environmental benefits are kind of an additional bonus to that benefit cost ratio. But so we haven't seen the thing, unfortunately, it's just that there's limited funding. Like for example, Hurricane Harvey, we had a 3-to-1 ratio of applications to funding availability. I think for BRIC it was around that, or 3-to-1 or 5-to-1 funding available to applications submitted. So it probably does pay to focus in on those hazard mitigation benefits as much as possible.
I'm wondering if we shouldn't have a break and then get on to people talking about their projects. Is that okay? How does that fit in with your agenda?
Yeah, I mean, that works well for us. We can go right into it. It might be, unless, sorry, we have kind of an exercise that we'd like to do with the group, so we might need just a couple minutes to allow people to think through these guiding questions, because we want folks to be able to share an update on where they are in this process related to hazard mitigation. And so are you in the planning phase? Are you in the project conceptualization phase? Have you submitted a BRIC application, or are you looking to do so in this next grant funding cycle? And so we'd like to kind of ask these questions and give 5 to 10 minutes per group. How many groups do we have on the line, Harriet?
So Susan, Rebecca, Gordon, Michelle, and Daryl, if you're up for it, given the work that you've been doing with the James River Association. I know we have had less contact. So 4, potentially 5.
Yeah, so if we can spend 5 to 10 minutes, and then a quick, we'll give Rowan and I will give some feedback, and Harriet, of course, too, and anyone else who wants to kind of jump in on the discussion. It would be great to hear about your projects or where you're at in this process.
Good, because we'll have a break, and then we'll only have about, we won't have, so I guess it's 5 minutes. Yeah, wonderful. Okay, so people, look at your question, and should we reconvene in 5 minutes?
Yeah, I'll 1:20, or sorry, 4:20. We'll reconvene and
Eastern time.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. All right, Harriet, are you there? Oops.
Thank you.
Yeah. I'll put this screen back up. Sorry, it's hard. I can't, it's hard not getting the visual cues for anyone from anyone. I'm not sure if my,
Oh, why is that?
well, it's I don't know if it's the where my video screens are or where I can see people's cameras, but I can't see any of the anyone's faces. So
You can't see anyone's faces at all.
not when I'm displaying, not when I'm sharing the screen.
Right.
Oh, wait, no, there we go. Okay, I fixed it though.
Right. Might have been how
You would,
you had it set up.
you would think that after a year and a half, I would have it figured out. Yeah. Okay. So do we have any volunteers on who wants to share first? And I think that just given time, if we can spend 5 minutes on kind of talking about the these questions, and then we can spend five or so minutes of feedback between the group, that would be great.
Well, given that Susan is more advanced, maybe I won't ask you, Susan, just because you've got kind of more help. You've got a team helping you right now, if you don't mind. I won't ask you first. So maybe Gordon.
Okay, off mute. Thank you. Yeah, I'll be glad to. Hold on. I'm just trying to position so I can see the questions clearly and things. Once again, of course, we're located in South Mississippi, Biloxi, Mississippi, Biloxi, Gulfport, etc. What are the hazards? What are the hazards your community faces? On an environmental viewpoint, we face our entire East Biloxi area is a high flood risk, flood zone. And that has led to a lot of things such as not new homes having to be built elevated 15, 16 feet, extreme high cost of flood insurance things, and still not having recovered from Hurricane Katrina. Before Katrina, we had 55 established buildings in certain areas of the community. Now we're down to 11. So that has also affected housing and the ability for more residents to move into the community, and also once I or well, also the lack of businesses in the community, and that has been not only because of Katrina and BP, but also because of other situations that has driven businesses away. In a way, and also have caused a lot of the businesses there to simply lose money and eventually move away. So it's a lot of different things there that where is we have a difficulty of attracting new residents into East Biloxi, and so we feel that our needs need to be new residents coming in, and so that it would help us be able to have new retail coming in and things. But housing, affordable housing, is definitely an issue. What is the status of your planning efforts? Well, we're working on solving all of these, which we're still trying to figure out what we can do first that would help the other issues. Well, we feel affordable housing definitely needs to be needs to be implemented soon. And there are some programs that we're working to put together there. Also, the food system, the grocery store would, I think, we would think act as a springboard for other businesses and for other residents to be able to move in and things. And then we're looking at the other things like green infrastructure. The green infrastructure can help with some of the flood issues and once again, new housing. Higher income would help with the income level, but it's definitely a low income community, and so the businesses as well would help bring in new people and help increase the income situation. If applicable, what mitigation actions are you considering? We are considering the green infrastructure that would help with the in certain parts of the town, that would help with the flooding issues. We're looking at alternative energy. Many of the people there have a high electricity bills and things, and so that's why we're looking at things like solar power with the net metering. Unfortunately, in Mississippi, the net metering policy is very weak, but we are working on with the PESC to dramatically improve the net metering policy and things. Also, transit. We have people in the community willing to work, but if they don't have traditional transportation, we have no bus system in that area. We do have a bus system, but it is half step at best, and it's very difficult to get on the bus. And then, like if we're in Biloxi and the job is in Gulfport, by bus it's a 2-hour drive anyway. So definitely an issue that we want mitigation action. We've had some attempts to where we are trying to form a transportation co-op that hasn't formulated yet. Our relationship with the public transit system, CTA, has been very poor. They have pretty much ignored us, and so that's why a lot of us want to just go ahead and put together our own. In relation to FEMA programs, based on what you already know and what we've covered, do you have any thoughts, questions, concerns related to the eligibility for FEMA costs? Yeah, well, I mean, as it was discussed, we were trying to see, particularly with the BRIC program, if we would be qualified, and that's why in partnership with Jonathan from STEPS Coalition, who had to step off, one of the strategies we are looking at is forming a community land trust, and will a community land trust help us in qualifying, for the funding, and we're trying to do more of our own as opposed to relying 100% on a relationship with the city. I'm not going to say our relationship with the city is horrible, and that we're at each other's throats, but we've got, I think, I will say a nice mild relationship with the city. That could be better. We feel we do have people within the city that favors our efforts to improve the community and things, but we still got to nurture and develop and build that relationship. We are not in any long-term plans for the Biloxi. When they put together their 10-year plan or 25-year plan, what they do is they include our community. Our community is just north of downtown. So our community is half formally, so included in the downtown restoration plan.
Sorry, I think I'm going to have to interject just to make sure that everybody else has a go and that there's time.
I'm sorry. Yeah,
to respond.
That's good. I think I was almost through anyway. But you got a good nutshell where we're at. Thanks for your time.
Yeah. in terms of I think I heard 3 really big projects, which was the green infrastructure to reduce flooding, alternative energy, and then transit are kind of the big projects that you're looking at. And the green infrastructure project, that's really compelling for FEMA. If it's going to reduce flooding, that's really easy to tie to resilience and reduce damage to people and property. And forming a community land trust would be one way to go about that. Alternatively, you talk to the city to see if they'd be willing to take on a project like that. So that would be something to continue investigating. With the alternative energy project, if you can prove out that it would build resilience into the community because the current power systems can't accommodate storms, and perhaps the alternative energy like solar would be more resilient, you might be able to squeeze that into a hazard mitigation project application. No promises, but you might be able to kind of squeeze it in there. In terms of transit, I'm not sure that that would fit well under hazard mitigation assistance.
I have one question for kind of both of you. Gordon, were you also thinking about property elevation?
Yes, I think I mentioned that the homes that are not grandfathered after Katrina, any new homes needs to be elevated, and right now it's about roughly 15 feet and things, and that adds as an extra expense to anybody who wants to build a home or buy a home in that area. So with a low income community, that's a difficult step for a lot of people.
Yeah. I was just going to say that FEMA will support. I mean, it would be there would still be a cost share of 25%, potentially less, but FEMA would pay $175,000, or rather 75% of $175,000 to elevate a home if it's in the floodplain. So that's the one criteria there. And it sounds like if the homes are being elevated 15 feet, then they certainly are within some sort of a floodplain.
Yes. Okay. That's encouraging. Thank you. That's good information.
But this is for I think he was discussing new homes that are being built. So I know FEMA will elevate existing homes, but I'm not sure about new development. So we'll have to think about that. But yeah, elevation of existing homes within the floodplain could also be eligible. And for those homes that are grandfathered with from Katrina, like you said, they're still at risk probably, so they might need to be elevated.
And they can use CDGB funding for the 25 match, correct?
Yes.
Good. You know, it's like a kind of, what do you want? We'll tell you whether or not you can have it. Kind of discussion. Rebecca, what do you want?
I'll tell you, this has just blown my mind today, because I was thinking this, and now I'm thinking this. I don't know why I never thought of all the magic words that you've just spilled out for me that are really important to what I'm dealing with in Miami, Oklahoma. So when you're saying reducing risk, and when you're saying looking at floodplain and stream restoration, and when you're looking at, I cannot tell you how many of these words just ring all kinds of bells for me. And I'm thinking, and my question would come to you, is in our area, living within and downstream of one of the largest Superfund sites in the country, that when there are these massive floods, they grab that mine waste and bring it down the stream. They're scouring places they've already deposited on and bringing that on downstream. All of that comes downstream and floods homes and neighborhoods and parks and playgrounds and everything. And the college campus. And then goes on down to a drinking water lake. Okay, and so I'm wondering, the big ask, and that is, maybe you can help me on this, is not only the city can apply, and but can this be a combination application? Can 3 of the tribes and 2 towns go together to do the big application? What do you think?
Yeah, FEMA does encourage kind of regional projects that support regional scale hazard mitigation. There will ultimately need to be one primary sub-applicant, so the one that kind of leads, submits the application. But if you're kind of in a partnership, that would, I think, make it stronger. Tribal, if they're federally recognized tribes, if any of them are, then tribal, tribes have often set aside or a separate pot of funding, and I'm not sure whether it's more or less competitive, but that may present an opportunity to. And there's also a tribal set aside for the C and CB, the capability and capacity building track that Johnny will have mentioned for BRIC. So that's another option if you want to apply for funding to support more detailed planning, which would ultimately lead to a strong FEMA project application. So that would be the response to how you might approach it from a partnership perspective. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. And I'm going to go set about talking this up because we've been depending on EPA money, and EPA money is limited because you tap the people that polluted the place, and they've all taken bankruptcy. And so it's it's depending on Superfund money, and it's depleted. And so it's plugging along year after year. It'll be another 30 years at this rate, and if they will keep the cleanup as good as it can be, or if they will keep degrading it because it's just cheaper to have a cheap fix rather than a good fix. But one of the things we've been looking to do is really getting an MOU for all the agencies that are involved, but we hadn't added in FEMA in that. So we're going to invite them to the table. Thank you very much. Very enlightening, very helpful discussion. And yeah.
The one thing that I will add is that if you're going to propose a mitigation action, it needs to kind of be comprehensive, I guess. So you couldn't say that it's only going to, it can't be reliant on another project application in order to be effective. So you would need to show that your action has a certain value of benefit associated with it that isn't then reliant on another agency coming through. So you would have to show that the project is comprehensive in that way. And so that's one risk when working with partners, is that it can kind of muddy the waters on, or not necessarily with partners, I shouldn't say, but with other agencies that are funding things. The mitigation action needs to kind of be standalone and not reliant on other agencies putting dollars in.
Yeah.
So you could presumably use phytoremediation and green infrastructure to both reduce flooding and deal with the Superfund site simultaneously. Is that your thinking?
That could be part of it, yeah.
Right. Good. So did you have any more to add, Rebecca?
No, I'm just very, very grateful for this discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Michelle.
Yes, first off, let me say thank you, because this has been very enlightening. Whenever we talk about applying for grants, it just is so overwhelming, and especially federal grants. And just want to start off by saying our relationship with the city of Port Arthur is very similar to that Gordon described. It's a little bit contentious at times due to the work that we do. CETA is a community organization that fights for clean air in an area that's surrounded by oil and chemical facilities that are causing chronic pollution to our largely minority and low income community. And so we sometimes struggle with the city to get them on board with the projects that we're doing. And especially if they're the ones having to apply for the funding, that's where we tend to run into a brick wall. Now, like I mentioned, some of the issues that we're facing are repeated flooding due to tropical storms and hurricanes and the chronic pollution. But we have started to work actually with the city. They've come on board for a green infrastructure project that we're working on with the American Planning Association, Anthropocene Alliance, River Network, and we're doing a pilot implementation with NIFWA funding. And we're also applying through Silver Jackets and the Army Corps of Engineers for flooding mitigation planning and a plan for that. And we're also looking to put together a more comprehensive plan that pulls together those bits and pieces from the various projects that we're working on to kind of have a little bit more of a holistic approach. And like I said, some of the implementations that we're looking at specifically are green infrastructure because of what I mentioned with the pollution. We also have the issue with stormwater runoff, picking up pollution from the area. We saw huge patches of oil contamination around the chemical facilities and the oil facilities. So that's what we're looking at. We're also trying to push the city. Again, this is a difficult point, and I'll come back to that in a second, to assist with buyouts where people are interested in that and home elevations. Now, the city pushback to us a lot of times with the projects that we're proposing is that they cannot apply for federal funding because the areas that we're looking to help are in what are designed as or designated as repetitive loss areas. So that kind of makes it even more complicated for us. And I guess that's where my question comes in. Is there any way around this with any type of brick funding, or is that just an issue that we cannot overcome?
So did you say they're not willing to do the buyouts or elevations because they're repetitive loss?
No, what they indicated to us is that they're running into problems applying for federal funding due to the fact that it's, and I guess that is more so a resiliency or a mitigation project specifically that they can't apply for, but they're also running into barriers in creating equitable buyout programs. So we have a lot of areas in Port Arthur that have very low housing prices and market prices due to the surrounding industry. So whenever they enter into a buyout plan design, they're running into the issue that whatever they offer is not going to be enough for people to actually relocate to a safer area. So I know there's a lot of problems all piled into one.
Yes, yeah, we had saw that issue in Houston as well, and I know maybe you're connected with them, but is it CER and some folks have been working on that. And Houston had Harris County did a bond issue where they are using some of the funding to subsidize that program so that they can make up the difference, because they're buying out folks in areas of the buyout value is not enough to buy a place somewhere outside in a safe area. So they're using that to subsidize and bring it up to an amount that they could, buy. But I think that's a kind of one idea, and I'm not sure what the Port Arthur would be thinking about that. But as far as the with buyouts, if they're in a repetitive loss area, that is one area that the FEMA's flood mitigation assistance program is designed to deal with repetitive loss properties and severe repetitive loss. So if you do have repetitive or severe repetitive loss, you actually have a smaller match requirement. So, which is a good thing, because it's down to I think 10% match, and for severe repetitive loss properties, I think it might even be a 0 match. So FEMA will fund the entire buyout. I'm not sure, and possibly elevation, I guess, if that's the other alternative. But then I'm not sure, there might be other issues there with the buyouts that you're dealing with. another way to approach it, I guess, is that just to look at mitigation projects that reduce the flood risk in the first place. So I'm not sure if you have a clear path whether you prefer one or the other, but one way is to propose projects that will reduce flooding and so that residents can stay in place. I'm not sure if that's an option, but yeah, so those are some initial thoughts. And brick and brick and HMGP, so post-disaster funding, can also be used for those kinds of projects, but flood mitigation assistance, FMA, is I think set up to deal well with the repetitive loss properties.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much.
Sure, it's not more complex than that. So those are just some initial thoughts.
Thank you.
Kelly's posted a question, but maybe we should first ask Susan to go and then deal with any other questions. So Susan.
I'm in DeSoto, Missouri. It's about 50 miles south of St. Louis, and we have flash flooding. It's not like river flooding, not like any other type of flooding. It takes everything in its path. In 2003, we had, like I said, a young father wash in his car through a small drainage tube. You wouldn't have thought it was possible. We have had a Corps of Engineers study, and through the years, we were on our city manager to apply for funding, and it did not happen until Harriet introduced us to buy-in. Since then, we have submitted money for our proposal for brick funding. We have 229 homes that are in danger designated by the Corps of Engineers. We've had a 2D flood study that we're waiting for from the USGS. 80 of the homes are designated as buyout, and half of that is one full block of our historic city Main Street. The other 85 are designated as elevation, and some of them are our historic Main Street. I don't know how you would do that when our buildings are already falling down now. So we have the flooding, that's our hazard. We have buildings collapsing. Our planning efforts are changing. We have the American Planning Grant, and he came yesterday, and we have National Fish and Wildlife Grant that we've been working on trying to figure out a plan for. But yesterday we looked specifically at the drain where the man that washed through the tube in 2003, and our American planning guy turned to our city manager and he said, "Do you know what a huge problem you have? This is going to be millions of dollars. The bridge is hanging suspended right there. So we need to repair this old bridge, and we need to put a detention pond in beside of it." So we're kind of changing our focus a little bit because that's very hazardous. It's not the only place that our road is hanging suspended, but MoDOT is getting ready to work on the other place in the creek. Meanwhile, with climate change, we've had the last couple of years kind of a drought, so it's not been too bad, but we have evacuated twice this year already. Once was by where I'm talking about the drainage tube on Valley Place, and it has a little apartment complex there, and they evacuated the residents on Friday, and 2 of the people were blind. So we've got so many problems, and with buy-in, we finally got 1 grant in, and we're waiting to hear still yet since October. We have high hopes still, but any and all help is always appreciated. I beg everybody to help us. I don't flood, but my heart goes out to these people that do. It's just heartbreaking to have to evacuate in the middle of the night for them, to see the kids get on the school bus crying because it's raining that day. I've seen it all. I've walked in their shoes, and I just feel for these people what they're going through. We were downstream of a shoe factory, and I watched 3 people die within days of each other a couple summers ago. We're a railroad town, and our town was started by the railroad. We're the major rail car repair shop in America, where all of the cars come to DeSoto. And so I can't understand why Union Pacific isn't helping us more, but that's a hard call for them. And it's just a historic old town, and we don't want to lose our main street. We want to get things fixed, and we certainly don't want to lose any other people. We're also possibly getting an Amtrak stop. We're in the perfect position. We used to have a depot, and we've worked hard on lots of options, but getting them to come through is another thing. It's the money, getting FEMA money. It just hasn't happened because we haven't applied until now.
Thank you.
Yeah, the hearing you talk about all the historic properties downtown, that is something when FEMA is looking at the replacement value of those structures, historic properties are going to be worth more in a benefit cost analysis sense, because they're either more expensive or impossible to replace. And so we can place an economic value on that.
With the Corps of Engineers study, the financial on the historic old buildings is not valued at anything higher than a regular home. Even our rural fire department is right in the middle of that. And we can't get to people from our rural fire department because they're underwater themselves. And the city can't get to our people because they have to use boats to get to them. So our closest rescuers are from 15, 20 minutes away. So it's a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
And also just to add to that, while you're thinking, Kelly said, Johnny, can you talk a bit more about the regional inflationary cost calculations for rehousing cost gaps for buyout programs? I hope that means more to you than it does to me.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. So the memo, I pulled it up. It says the specific geographic location of structures can increase acquisition and elevation costs. The benefit amounts identified above are the 276,000 and 175,000 may be adjusted using the most current locality multipliers. And that needs to be just by industry accepted construction cost guides. So we have a nationwide building replacement value data set that we use to adjust those values, either upwards and never downwards, because 276,000 is accepted. But if you wanted to, just for example, buy or acquire a home in downtown Manhattan, you could do so and adjust based on the locality multipliers of doing so.
But I would just warn that, I mean, I think within the Anthropocene Alliance, the communities you're working with, I'd probably say, for the most part, the cost of housing would not be above the national average, I'm guessing. But like in places like we did a little study in Connecticut, for example, and it was like 8% above, the costs. But I think the gap, but Kelly mentioned that the word gap, I think she might have been referring to that closing the gap we talked about with Port Arthur, where the cost of the buyout is not enough to buy a new home. Is that right? That gap?
Yeah, because I know that with the CDBG mitigation or DR funds for buyouts, you can add additional, they call them incentives, right? But like an additional amount of money to help people get into new housing. So I think I misunderstood what Johnny was saying. Is you're saying that the BCA calculation limit can be changed based on regional housing values. But I guess what I was wondering is, can you speak to whether or not you can include additional funding for buyouts to help address that rehousing gap between people's pre-storm value and what it will cost them to actually get new housing in the area.
Yeah, I think that is FEMA does, unfortunately, we were talking about kind of the BCA and how you can justify doing the project in the first place, but you can't actually get additional funding for that. I think HUD funding is designed to kind of close that gap a little bit. And in some cases, like local communities like Harris County have passed bond measures that provide funding to further close the gap. So yeah, unfortunately, the BCA won't do that. The approach we're discussing was just a way to kind of streamline the BCA, reduce that one barrier. And in many cases, like you said, it's not going to be the pre-storm value of the home is not going to be high enough to purchase something in a safer area.
Well, I'm conscious that I have to go in 4 minutes onto my next call, and we've taken everybody's time. I am incredibly grateful to you, Johnny and Rowan, for your time and everything. So, and I know you can tell how grateful everyone else is. And I believe that we're going to discuss, so I believe that if Kresge is able to continue the funding, then you might be able to actually help some of our members with their applications, correct?
Yes, so we are hoping to be granted another cycle of Kresge funding that would start, I think it would start in September or October. But if you're planning to do any applications, FEMA applications this cycle, then pre-applications need to go in right around September or October. So we're willing to help out. Leading up to that, we're happy to work with you and further brainstorm on specific project ideas you might have, whether that's projects or capacity building ideas for capacity building grants. And so maybe a next step would be, I'm not sure, Harriet, whether you want to interface directly with your partners.
No, so I think probably the best thing is if I coordinate, and because we also have the offer of the help from the buy-in team for any groups that are likely to include a component of assisted relocation and then using the green space for green infrastructure as well. So I think if we could kind of bring you to, and I think we have potential offer of help from Kristen to facilitate meetings. So yeah, so maybe if any of you want help, please let me know, and then I'll help set up the teams that might be able to help you. And if you think that that would could include, you don't have to know at this stage, but if you think it could include any element of assisted relocation, let me know, and I'll include Kelly in that call. Thank you. You are terrific.
Thank you.
I'm so grateful to everyone. We will get these dollars, big ideas.